The first warm breeze of April had rolled into Ashwood, Oregon, carrying the scent of wet cedar, blooming lilac, and freshly brewed coffee from the corner cafe that acted as both town hall and therapist's office. The streets were damp from the morning drizzle, sunlight slipping between clouds like a hesitant guest, casting soft reflections across the puddles that lined the cracked sidewalks. For most of the townsfolk, spring in Ashwood meant porch repairs, Saturday yard sales, and awkwardly optimistic joggers rediscovering their New Year's resolutions. For Caleb Rains, it meant failure, or at least, that's what it looked like through the half-painted canvas propped against the window of his rented studio. Caleb was 34, with the kind of face that made people assume he was either deeply artistic or perpetually tired. Both were true. He had moved back to Ashwood 6 months ago after a burnout episode in Portland that ended with him leaving behind a big mural commission, a breakup, and several unpaid parking tickets. His mother had called it a soul reset. Caleb called it creative rock bottom with complimentary home cooking. Now, his mornings followed a ritual. Wake up to the sound of the neighbor's rooster named Beyoncé for reasons no one questioned, brew an offensively strong cup of coffee, and stare at a blank canvas until he either painted something meaningful or convinced himself that meaningful was overrated. His small rented cottage sat on a quiet street lined with maple trees just beginning to bud. The walls inside were a collage of half-finished sketches, motivational post-it notes, and a collection of mismatched mugs that had followed him from apartment to apartment. The cottage smelled faintly of turpentine and toast. Outside, Ashwood hummed gently, a place where everyone waved whether they knew you or not, and where the hardware store clerk could predict weather better than the meteorologist. Caleb's new project was supposed to be simple, a personal painting of a riverside memory from his childhood, something to remind him why he loved art in the first place. But simplicity had turned into paralysis. For weeks, he'd been sketching and erasing the same composition. A winding stream beneath a wooden bridge, sunlight dappling through trees. No matter how he adjusted it, something felt off. That morning, after another failed attempt, he threw his pencil onto the table and groaned. "Congratulations, Caleb, you've officially made water look depressed." The only witness was his pet turtle, Norman, who blinked slowly from his tank, unimpressed. Then came a knock at the door. It was Maggie Thompson, his 62-year-old next-door neighbor and part-time gossip columnist for the Ashwood Gazette. Maggie had the posture of a retired ballerina and the energy of someone who replaced her blood with espresso. "Morning, sunshine," she chirped, stepping inside uninvited, balancing a tray with a lemon muffin and her signature mason jar of kombucha. "I brought you breakfast and unsolicited advice." Caleb sighed. "Both sound terrifying." "You need fresh air," Maggie declared, setting down the tray. "You've been cooped up in this art cave for days. Come join the Community Art Fair Committee meeting. We're planning to paint the town mural again." "Maggie, the last time I joined a town event, I got guilt-trapped into face-painting toddlers who wanted Batman tattoos. And didn't you look adorable doing it?" she teased. He smiled despite himself. "I'll think about it." "That's code for no, isn't it?" "Maybe." "Well, suit yourself. But remember, sometimes the masterpiece comes after the mess." She left the words hanging in the air as she exited, leaving the scent of lemon muffin and mild guilt behind. Caleb turned back to the canvas, chewing a piece of muffin. He grabbed his eraser and rubbed out a section of the bridge that looked too rigid. The pencil line smudged, spreading into an unintended blur. He erased harder, and the paper tore slightly near the corner. "Fantastic," he muttered. "Now it's a metaphor." He grabbed his watercolor brush to soften the edges, but his elbow knocked over a half-full cup of coffee, spilling directly across the artwork. Brown liquid bled through the page, dripping onto the floor in slow-motion horror. Caleb froze, then whispered, "You've got to be kidding me." He snatched tissues, blotted furiously, but it was too late, the sketch was gone. Weeks of effort, erased by caffeine. He sank into his chair, staring at the ruined page. Norman blinked at him again, as if to say, "Told you to use a lid." For a while, he just sat there, letting the silence stretch. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. A low, frustrated, but genuine laugh. "All right, universe. I see your symbolism." Outside, rain began to fall again, gentle, rhythmic, forgiving. Later that afternoon, Caleb wandered downtown, hoodie pulled up, sketchbook under his arm. The Art Fair Committee meeting was in full swing at Maple Bean Cafe, a cozy little shop with exposed brick walls and a chalkboard menu that changed depending on the barista's mood. Inside, a handful of locals gathered around tables strewn with flyers and coffee cups. Maggie waved him over enthusiastically. "Caleb, The prodigal artist returns. He gave her a look. You told them I was coming. Manifestation, dear. Among the group was Tyler Brooks, a high school art teacher with an ironic mustache, and Rita Delgado, a baker who painted landscapes on the side for stress management. They were debating mural themes: heritage, community, hope. Caleb listened quietly at first, sketching idly in the margins of a napkin. Caleb, Tyler said suddenly. You're the only one here with a real art degree. What's your take? He looked up. Honestly, maybe we're overthinking it. Maybe it doesn't need to mean everything. Just something that feels alive. Rita nodded. Like that bridge by the river. Caleb froze. Yeah, like that. When he returned home that evening, the ruined sketch still sat on his table. But instead of tossing it, he pinned it on the wall. The stains had dried into strange, earthy patterns, accidental beauty and destruction. He pulled out a fresh sheet, took a deep breath, and began to draw again. This time, he didn't chase perfection. The lines flowed faster, freer. He added loose brushstrokes, splashes of color that bled slightly at the edges. The new bridge leaned differently, curved more naturally. The water shimmered unevenly, like real life. Hours passed without him noticing. When he finally stepped back, the painting wasn't flawless, but it was alive. He smiled. You know, Norman, maybe messes have better rhythm. The turtle blinked slowly, as if in agreement. Outside, the spring rain eased into a mist, and the clock on his wall ticked softly, marking the moment when frustration turned into flow. And in that quiet, Caleb realized Maggie had been right. Sometimes the masterpiece does come after the mess. The next morning began with sunlight spilling across the old hardwood floors of Caleb's cottage, painting amber streaks through the dusty air. Birds chirped on the maple tree outside, and the faint hum of lawnmowers echoed through Ashwood, a sure sign that everyone had collectively decided the rain was over, even though Oregon weather rarely kept promises. Caleb woke up to the scent of paint and stale coffee, feeling something he hadn't felt in months: momentum. His half-dried painting leaned on the easel, illuminated in soft morning light. It wasn't perfect. Some colors bled too much, some lines tilted awkwardly, but there was energy in it, something raw and true. He brewed a fresh pot of coffee, this time placing the mug far from his workspace. Not today, caffeine demon, he muttered. Outside, the neighborhood was alive. Maggie was watering her tulips in a sun hat shaped like an umbrella, dual-purpose fashion, she called it. Across the street, kids were chalk drawing rainbows on the sidewalk while their parents discussed the rising price of mulch. Caleb stood at his doorway for a moment, breathing it all in, the smell of cut grass, the chatter, the renewal. It was a small town, sure, but there was something beautifully cyclical about it. Seasons changed, people complained, life went on. He grabbed his sketch pad and headed downtown, deciding to paint outside near the bridge that had inspired him in the first place. Blank, blank. By noon, the Ashwood River shimmered under a generous sun. The old wooden bridge arched lazily across the water, framed by willows just beginning to leaf out. Families picnicked along the bank. Someone was playing an off-key guitar. A pair of teenagers attempted synchronized jumps off the dock with varying success. Caleb found a shaded bench, unpacked his brushes, and began sketching. At first, he hesitated, ghosts of perfectionism whispering in his mind, but soon the strokes came naturally. He didn't worry about symmetry, didn't chase straight lines. The bridge wobbled slightly, the water bent in odd reflections, but it felt alive. He was halfway through when he heard a familiar voice. Well, look at you, Mr. Outdoorsy Artist. He turned to see Maggie, walking Norman the turtle in a stroller. He needs fresh air too, she explained, dead serious. Caleb laughed. Of course he does. She peeked over his shoulder. Now this has soul. See what happens when you stop fighting the eraser. He shook his head, smiling. You should start charging for your wisdom. Oh, I already do. I just collect it in gossip. They both laughed. As the day wore on, other townsfolk stopped by to peek. Rita brought a basket of cookies. Tyler snapped photos for the Gazette. Even the mayor, who mostly showed up to take credit for things, wandered over to shake Caleb's hand and declare, this could be the next postcard image of Ashwood. For once, Caleb didn't deflect the compliment. He just said, thanks. Took me a few mistakes to get here. By late afternoon, the light shifted golden, turning the water into rippling honey. Caleb packed up his brushes, feeling a quiet satisfaction bloom inside him. The kind that doesn't shout or celebrate, just sits warmly in the chest. That evening, the cafe buzzed with chatter. The art fair was only a week away, and plans were rolling fast. Maggie had assigned committees, because democracy needs leadership. Tyler had ordered paints for the mural, and Caleb was, somehow, roped into mentoring the town's middle school art club. He wasn't sure how that had happened, but when the kids showed up at his cottage 2 days later, backpacks stuffed with markers and uncontainable curiosity, he didn't regret saying yes. The group included Lena, a 13-year-old who only drew dragons, Owen, who refused to use colors because grayscale is deep, and MIA, who constantly dropped her brushes and blamed gravity. When they saw Caleb's ruined first drawing pinned beside the new one, they gasped. "Whoa, you kept the messed up one?" Lena asked. "Yeah," Caleb said. "It's part of the story." Owen frowned. "But it's all smudged and coffee. Why?" "Exactly," Caleb replied. "That's how I learned not to put drinks near genius-level art." They laughed. But then he added, "Sometimes mistakes teach faster than success does. That one," he nodded toward the new painting, "only exists because the first one failed." The room went quiet for a moment, then MIA whispered, "So, we shouldn't throw away our bad drawings. Only if they're teaching you something," he said. "Otherwise, yeah, recycling bins exist for a reason." It became their running joke. Every time someone messed up, they'd shout, "Recycled masterpiece." Over the next week, the studio turned into chaos, paint splatters, loud laughter, and bursts of creativity. Caleb found himself rediscovering what he loved most about art, the shared joy of creating, the imperfect beauty of the process. By Saturday, the day of the Ashwood Art Fair, the whole town had transformed. Strings of lights hung across Main Street, tables displayed local crafts, and the smell of kettle corn drifted through the air. Caleb's painting was displayed front and center, framed in simple oak. Right beside it, Maggie had pinned the stained, ruined sketch, because of course she had. "Contrast," she said when he asked. "People need to see the journey." Throughout the day, people stopped to admire both. Some complimented the new one's vibrant tones, others found strange charm in the smudged original. Kids pointed and whispered, "That's the coffee one." Caleb just smiled. Later that afternoon, as golden hour settled over the fair, a light breeze fluttered the sketch. Caleb stepped closer and noticed something. Where the coffee had dried unevenly, it had formed shapes that almost looked like trees reflected in water. Unintended, imperfect, but poetic. He whispered to himself, maybe that one never failed at all. From the stage, Maggie's voice boomed through the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Ashwood's local artists, especially Caleb Rains, who taught us all that sometimes, when life erases your drawing, it's just making room for a better one." Applause rippled through the crowd. Caleb felt his face flush. He raised a mock salute, half embarrassed, half proud. And in that moment, surrounded by laughter, community, and the comforting smell of fried dough, he realized success had never been about perfect strokes or gallery walls. It had been about showing up again after the eraser. That night, as the fair wound down, Caleb walked home beneath fairy lights strung between lampposts. He carried his new painting under one arm, the old sketch under the other. Fireflies blinked softly over lawns, and the sound of distant music drifted through the cool air. When he reached his studio, he placed both drawings side by side again. The ruined one didn't look like a mistake anymore. It looked like the foundation of growth. He turned off the lights, leaving just the glow of the moon across the paper, and said quietly to himself, "Erase, redraw, repeat. That's how everything gets better." Outside, the spring night deepened, the air fragrant with blooming lilacs, and the hum of Ashwood carried on, proof that even after every smudge, the story always continues.
Like and subscribe if you want daily dose of happiness and motivation.